Hi, my name's Naomi, and this is the first video for the Why Are You Antinatalist contest. So I've looked for a few years, and making a video would normally be the last thing I do because I've got a lot of public speaking anxiety. But I was galvanized into making one after watching Life Sucks video, You're Not Alone, which talked about how the fear people feel coming out as an antinatalist. But it also showed the importance of how it is to show your face and voice to the community because it provides a form of like camaraderie and it's a form of activism, which will actually might convince people. And I thought it was like really important to show that there's many people out there, they all look different, and I'm a female with mixed race background living in Australia, so they're not all just white males or just males in general. So we all look different, and hopefully you can relate to this face of mine. So I'm not going to be talking about my philosophy behind anti-nihilism, like what brought me to it, because there's plenty of videos about that, and I think it's like a saturated space. But I'm going to talk about my own personal experiences as to why I became an anti-nihilist. And I think it's because I would say I was born an anti-nihilist in that I have a pessimistic personality, I have genetic depression, anxiety, and so on. I'm highly sensitive, etc. And I think those personality types are more inclined to be an anti-nihilist. And then in high school, my real exposure to the shittiness of humanity basically was when I read Animal Liberation in the library, and that's by Peter Singer, and it's basically a book about the starting point of the animal liberation movement and animal rights movement. And it was my first exposure to the concept of factory farming and where actually the food we eat comes from. And I was so shocked at the time that I actually wrote a speech to give to my English class, and back then I wasn't a good speechwriter at all, but this time I was like so passionate. I wrote a speech and I gave it to my class, and even printed out photos from the abattoirs to hold up during the speech. And the English teacher said, "Oh, I used to be that passionate when you were young." So I guess she meant that as over time, when she grew old, it's like she just became jaded like adults do, and I don't want to become like that. I don't want to like lose my spark, and I'm trying to find it again. Normally I wouldn't do anything like this, but I think it's important because I don't want to stand back and not do anything when I see something's going wrong. So I just the next incident in my life was basically that I've suffered from loneliness and depression for a long time, especially from the loneliness. Like I've felt completely isolated from my peers in high school, and then when I went to uni, like it was the same experience that I felt so lonely. My only escape was like drugs, alcohol, which is another drug, and video games. That was the only way for me to escape from my suffering, basically. And it was like a very lonely, painful period of my life, and I was working at a refugee organization because I was still a stupid idealist, and a person from that organization invited me to their church, and I went there, and that was the first time I actually experienced some form of belonging, because people actually asked me how I was doing, and they were smiling. And I know it sounds kind of lame, but I decided, well, I might become a Christian because everyone Christian is so nice. And I read up on the apologists, and just to try to support my views, because I can't support a view without, or belief without evidence. But eventually that all fell apart because I couldn't sustain my belief in that God anymore, and I just fell apart from the friends that I had there. And so that was another dead end, basically. I just couldn't find a way through religion. And I also later on had a stroke, in my when I was 27, which when I was really young. So, and that was during the time when I still believed in God and I prayed and I felt like I could had a spiritual experience, basically. But I know that in retrospect, I know that's all in my brain. It's all generated by my brain, and just a way, it's a self-preservation mechanism, probably, and that God doesn't really exist. And if they did exist, they're malicious because, it's just a roll of the dice as to whether you get a stroke or any kind of just devastating disease. My whole family has diseases, like really devastating ones. They're all autoimmune or it's something really bad, and that's because I have like a Jewish Korean heritage, and the Jewish genes are just bad, and they shouldn't have bred it in the first place. So I'm just determined to stop the cycle because of that. And even in high school, I was like so depressed that I was thinking of suicide at that point, and I had a copy of Final Exit in my closet, which talks about how to kill yourself using helium. And of course, I couldn't get helium, so I'm still alive, even though I've had attempts later on and they all failed. So it's just I don't want to bring another being into this world that could go through the same thing as me, because that's such suffering, like immense amounts of suffering, which didn't have to happen. So, anyway, basically, my story ends by the fact that I found my current boyfriend, who's absolutely wonderful, and he's also vegan and antinatalist, and he's like a wonderful person all around. He's like my best friend and my soulmate. And he even had a vasectomy, so that's great. I have my friends. I have two friends. They're both basically antinatalists, functionally antinatalists. So it's wonderful. They both understand me. Like I found like people on my wavelength. So eventually, after like 31 years, which is amazing, and moreover, I found the antinatalist community, which is like, it's changed my life basically. Like I go on it all the time, and I don't contribute all the time to these discussions, but it's just great to actually have people who I can relate to, and they can relate to me, and we're like a community of people who aren't crazy in a world which is crazy and deluded, and they all worship life when we shouldn't be worshipping it. We should be like saying, life is a terrible thing, and there's a terrible force behind it, or maybe there's no force at all. But at any rate, thank you for not making me feel like I'm a crazy person, for being there for me.